So, I was really looking forward to giving you guys this really long, monotone historical lesson, right? It's going to take the rest of the afternoon. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do 3 slides. You guys can Google that crap, right? Or go to class. So, when we talk about design, I think a lot of times if you ask your dad or whatever what design was, he's going to think about modernism. Modernism was a response to the chaos that followed World War I. Remember, they thought that was going to be the last war we were ever going to have. Joke's on them, right? Things got more crazy. Technology, I mean, we take it for granted now, but that was like, you still didn't have toasters in people's kitchens at that point. And so there was a period of time where all of this change happened, followed by the Great Depression, followed by World War II. And people just wanted a sense of stability and control. It's through that period of time that the Bauhaus and psychology from right around the turn of the century came together to determine these core principles. And depending on who teaches you this stuff, there's 6, there's 4, there's 12, doesn't really matter. But aside from making a really cool domino on crack kind of situation going on here, there are these principles that we use throughout our work. And maybe I need to make a little caveat first. When I use the word design today, I mean photography, I mean fashion design, anything in which we are using visual representations. If you really want to get nerdy with it, and I will later, we can talk about words, because words are really important as well. But for the most part, there are these things that we use as our brains, even if we were just naked cavemen walking around in order to make sense of the world. So we're cruising along, and we get to the 60s, and things start to kind of come undone. We start to have this backlash to that stability. And very quickly, you saw society change in many, many phenomenal ways. The civil rights movement happened. Vietnam was becoming less and less popular. Watergate hit. All of a sudden, we can't trust reality anymore. And it wasn't so much as like we cracked the lens of modernism, but we kind of like took a kaleidoscope and smashed it on the ground, where you could kind of redefine what reality is actually going to be, which ushered in an age of postmodernism. As this graph shows, there was all this chaos prior to the end of the war. And then I think we tried to pretend that things were going to be chill. But then things got crazy again, and we had to stop pretending. And things had just gotten progressively like more abstract sense. We've abandoned the idea of a universal truth. At one point, and it's very telling, we started right around here with like 3 TV networks. By the time we get here, we have 100 million TikTok accounts that are essentially TV stations all around. It's the same thing with religion. You went from a couple of core faiths to roll your own throughout the 70s and 80s until today. Gestalt kind of fails in that regard because it stops being representative of the context in which we now live. It made sense when there was a common thread, when everybody's watching the same 3 channels, when everybody's going to the same churches. And it was very repressive under modernism. This is a better reflection of the chaos of human life and just people being people. So what hasn't changed is the way that design operates as a service. As it started in 1924 when the name graphic design was actually coined, persuasion and information to create an action is literally the thing that design does. This also applies, like I said, to photography. You are either giving somebody the picture of the thing that's happening, like journalism, or you're persuading them to take on a certain mood or feeling that comes along with that information. And then it might just be an emotional reaction that you want. Most of the time, it leads to some sort of conversion, either getting people to go to your website or to buy things, whatever else. But at the end of the day, that's the core of design. Form is in the service to function, and we use aesthetics to do so. What has changed, though, thanks to our friend there? And not just who was before him, obviously, but he's a good representation. We got a 9, an F, and a V people also, just kind of getting the pattern here. We've kind of stepped away from this idea of the civil society and this global community that we were really trying to push towards through modernism, and it's continued to kind of fall apart until we get to this point where We really just want to stand out as individuals. It's, go get that bag on your own, kind of sell everyone else down the river as long as you benefit. And it's led to all this polarization and distrust and just like kind of the corrosion of everything as far as truthfulness is concerned. So we're at a point now with advertising and graphic design or photography where we don't even know what we're really looking at. You throw in the artificial intelligence angle of it, and it's like, did they actually make, what is this? Is this real? So here we have it to MP and T, by the way. There's really no way to know what we're actually looking at right now, what purpose it's actually serving. Is this a picture of something being built or being torn down? It's really hard to know. And it's only within the context and the cues that we have. And it actually seeps into our work as illustrators and designers. On the left, we have a piece by a hunter-gatherer, and this was like pretty radical in 2005 or so. It's like, wow, it's taking this like skeuomorphic thing that everybody's kind of backlashing as the first iPhones were coming out, and made this organic form into this very clean vector. Looks like nothing, but we take it forward and we apply it to an organic shape, and we actually have taken that back out of its flatness and made it less flat, but it's still a flat graphic. So what is it? What exactly are we dealing with here? And 10LA. All right, so we are dealing with new problems. We are in an era, we are 25 years into the 21st century. It's weird, because I'm a kid from the 80s, and the 2000s were like so crazy, right? Like, oh my God, it's out there, we're gonna have jet cars and stuff, and instead, we don't, right? We have cyber trucks that look terrible. Modernism and postmodernism are both pre-internet and mostly pre-digital. They are 20th century solutions and sense-making devices that maybe don't have all of the tools that it needs in order to service us the way that we need to. I would say that as things started to splinter, the internet really marked around the mid-90s a split in postmodernism where the reversal of how we used to broadcast information to people was reversed. Now everyone's their own newspaper with a blog, and it's only gotten progressively more complex and more amplified as social media continues to spread these things around. This has led to a glut of design and aesthetic work that has a lot of style and not a lot of substance. A lot of it's just trying to gain traction and be new for the sake of being new and stopping people as they go through their feeds each day. So I started to think about this in a more holistic standpoint. These photos are actual things. Obviously one's a sculpture and one of them is staged and one of them's built. One of them's natural and one of them's from a movie, and it has references there. But it still takes the same cues that we saw back with the crazy dominoes. Why can't proximity as a gestalt refer to our relationship with our family or our age differences? Coherence could be wrapped around not just location of items on a page, but our worldviews and our biases. So I was thinking of all of these various ways that we can expand the library of Gestalt principles. And I was originally going to call them Gestalt Ultras, but then I made it instead. So it's Gestaltura, which is like Sepultura, for those of you who aren't familiar with Brazilian speed metal. But the 4 original principles here in the center, they are impacted by forces, and they become contextual gestalts. So our proximity could be affected by our language skills, which could affect and influence our association. And so we've got this series of 5 or 6 more in which ways we can frame mentally the things that we're trying to work through. And I actually feel, because I'm not like digital first guy, I'm of that age, I don't believe in posting every little turd that you make along the way on your Instagram feed just because it's like, oh, it's work in progress, it shows empathy. It's like, no, stop using words. Keep it to yourself, and you'll come out with better stuff, and people are like, wow, where'd that come from? You go, because I'm a genius. All right, so lastly, use reality as your constraint. but only as a last resort. You are not its victim. Don't say to yourself, and I know this is really hard for some students who are just coming out of high school or whatever, and they're like, oh, well, what's the right answer? No, there's no right answer. You are answering the question in the way that you will create that question, based on the context that you came from your background, from your mental health status, from your health status, from your technological background. All of these things are going to dictate what the right answer is for you. And will it be the answer that the client wants? Probably not. But it is an answer, and it gets you closer to the answer that they are going to want to pay you for. It's imperative that you clarify your objective throughout. It's like, yeah, but they're coming to you for your expertise. If it sucks and it fails, they're not coming back. So why don't you just do what's right and make it better? Look for the opportunities in your failures. There is more to learn from losing than there is from winning. If someone's always patting you on the back, you're going to come to a point in your life where people reject you, and you're going to be like, oh, why now, right? It's always good to question yourself and to go back and to look at, you know what? I don't know everything. Let me try this again. Here's what the exercise shows us. That even though we are all creatives, we're all essentially living within probably 100 miles of Sacramento, we're all probably within 20 to 30 years of each other in age. We were all given the same resources, the same steps, and it was only through our context and the decisions that we made on the fly without overthinking them, most of the time in this case, we came up with unique results. I haven't done this before, but I'm very certain that 90% of what we saw come out of these folded exercises are not going to match. If they did, I would be shocked.